November 2024. Germany's coalition government had crumbled under the weight of a stagnating economy, declining wages, immigration struggles, and an uncertain future. Since 2020, Germany's economy has been flat, with only Estonia and Finland faring worse in Europe. To make matters worse, the IMF projects this trend will continue for the near future as questions arise around the durability of Germany's industrial economy. And the right-wing populist party, AfD, shattered expectations, winning more votes than ever before and surging to a historic second-place finish. Clearly, Germans are fed up. This begs the question, what happened? This is Germany, the sick man of Europe. Today, Germany is referred to as the Exportweltmeister, or export champion. Following World War II, Germany's reputation and economy were in shambles, but quick action related to deregulation, the adoption of the Deutschmark, and the Marshall Plan ushered in Germany's economic miracle. The primary driver of this miracle, high-quality, high-value goods export to the world. Leveraging the skills gained during World War II, Germany became a global leader in automobiles, machinery, chemicals, and precision engineering, a reputation that stands to this day. By 2012, exports made up 50% of GDP, the highest of any major economy. Over time, much of Germany's growth was related to trade with China. At the time, China's industrial base was growing rapidly, and to support this, they imported machines, chemicals, and know-how from Germany. As China's consumers became increasingly wealthy, they too demanded German products, with VW, BMW, and Mercedes generating 40% of all sales in China. This was great when China was growing and not competing, but this heavy reliance on China decimated Germany's industrial base when global supply chains were disrupted during COVID. Worse yet, China has begun to overtake Germany as the future of cars shifts to EVs. In 2023, China shipped 1.6 million EVs, whereas Germany shipped 686,000. The most remarkable aspect of this, 40% of Chinese EVs were shipped to the EU. Just as the Dutch were overtaken in shipbuilding by the British, it seems that the Germans were being overtaken by the Chinese, right under their nose. The breaking point came in 2024 when VW, Germany's industrial crown jewel, announced plans to shut down factories at home for the first time ever. The weak demand for their cars and new competition meant that VW had excess capacity of 500,000 vehicles, or 2 whole factories. After nearly 100,000 workers walked off the job and intense negotiation, the union struck a deal to reduce 35,000 jobs and cut billions in cost over the coming years. But this isn't relegated just to automobile manufacturers. China is outproducing Germany in almost every industrial sector, from machinery to pharmaceuticals. Germany's industrial production fell 1.5% in 2023, while China's grew 4.6%. This industrial output will also continue to face pressure as Germany has one of the lowest birth rates in the world, at 1.35 per woman. By 2030, it is estimated that 24% of Germans will be 67 years or older, while the working age population shrinks by 300 to 400,000 per year. You don't need to be a mathematician to know that this is a problem, especially on an economy so heavily reliant on exports. But there is more to the story than waning global demand, because not only is Germany heavily reliant on global trade, but it is equally reliant on cheap Russian gas. For years, Germany's energy policy was simple: buy cheap Russian gas, phase out nuclear, phase out coal, and push non-economic renewables. In 2011, Germany generated 23% of all electricity from nuclear sources. The country had total electricity production of 610 terawatt-hours, with an average cost of 25 euro cents per kilowatt-hour. But after the Fukushima disaster in 2011, Germany abandoned all logic and decided to phase out its nuclear plants. To make up for this lost energy, Germany signed agreements with Russia to supply cheap natural gas and increased the use of more costly renewable sources of energy. This lowered production to 560 terawatt hours and increased costs by 28% to 32 euro cents per kilowatt hour. However, most Germans were fine with this increased cost of energy and the relationship with Russia. That was, of course, until Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Following the invasion and the destruction of Nord Stream 1, energy prices skyrocketed. At their peak in 2022, German natural gas prices were 1,000% higher than in 2020. But this doesn't paint the whole picture. While natural gas only comprised 15% of Germany's electricity, many large manufacturers were heavily reliant on natural gas for both energy and as an input into production. As a result, factories shut down and industrial output in energy-intensive sectors collapsed by 10% in 2023, the worst decline in modern German history. The most extreme example was BASF, the world's largest chemical producer, who saw a 3.2 billion euro increase in energy costs in just 1 year. This has had devastating consequences to the German economy. For one, BASF cut costs at their main German plant by 500 million euros, reducing production of key products and shifting production abroad. The final nail in the coffin was when BASF invested nearly 10 billion euros in a new chemical complex in China instead of Germany. The irony in the matter, had Germany not shifted away from nuclear and coal, this would never have happened. And now, as Germany scrambles to turn the tide, they're realizing it's a little too late. There is a tertiary impact from all of this. 19% of German employees work in the manufacturing sector, more than double most peer nations. As demand for German products has declined and costs have risen, primarily due to energy, there has been increasing pressure on wages and ultimately jobs. Since 2020, real wages have fallen by 2% in Germany, compared to a 1.5% increase across the OECD, placing pressure on consumer spending. Unfortunately, consumer spending has always lagged most peer nations. For instance, Germans historically saved at 2 times the rate of Americans, and with recent economic pressures, this has increased to 5 times the rate of Americans. But layer on declining wages and you have a recipe for disaster. German consumer spending has stagnated on real terms and is nearly the same level as it was in 2015. This downward economic wage cycle is continuing to place a ton of pressure on the German economy. One solution to this is to lower taxes and/or introduce some stimulus, but unfortunately, Germany can't do that either because of a thing known as the debt brake. In 2009, following the Great Recession, Germany decided to introduce a mechanism that limits the federal government's structural deficit to 0.35% of GDP. Now, to be honest, we are fans of the idea of a debt brake, but we think 0.35% is likely too low. Compared to other countries, Germany's borrowing limit is insanely strict. For example, the US sits at 6 to 7%, France at 5.5%, Italy at 7.4%, and the UK at 6%. The result is that Germany has limited its ability to invest strategically and attract foreign investment. Let's break this down. Firstly, due to years of chronic underinvestment, Germany's infrastructure is crumbling. And although we don't subscribe to the idea of overinvestment in infrastructure to spur the economy due to diminishing returns on invested capital, we do believe that Germany is likely due for an injection of capital to keep up pace. In 2024, Germany spent 1.5% of GDP on infrastructure, compared to the high-income country average of 2.7%. What makes this worse is the fact that Germany relies more heavily on exports than both the US and France. A crumbling infrastructure doesn't exactly scream world-class supply chain, and without that, attracting major investment becomes a tough sell. The second issue is that the debt brake makes it tough for Germany to attract businesses with competitive tax policies. Lowering taxes would surely breach the debt brake, and as such is nearly impossible. But here's the thing. We think Germany has to lower its taxes. The average employment tax wedge is 48%, compared to the OECD average of 35%. Corporate taxes are around 30% compared to the OECD average of 23.8%, and capital gains tax is a flat 26.4%, which is above the United States maximum capital gains tax rate on those with income over $518,000. You might be thinking that Germany could simply break the debt brake. No pun intended. However, this would require a constitutional amendment, which is nearly impossible to do. Overall, Germany has taken fiscal conservatism to the extreme and has possibly crippled their economy. But this conservatism does not end with the wallet. It also extends into bureaucracy. Germany is very unattractive for entrepreneurs and capital investments. High taxes, high wages, high energy costs, and the final nail in the coffin, a bureaucratic nightmare. Starting a business in Germany takes more than a month, whereas in the United States it takes a few days. How does that make any sense? For special projects like wind farms, permits take 5 to 6 years to get approved, whereas in Texas or China, it can take less than a year. Germany's long love of bureaucracy can be traced back to its history with strict legal structure dating back to the Prussian administrative system. In addition, after significant heartache following World War II, Germany over-indexed on downside protection at the cost of getting things done. This breeds a culture of conservatism that is perfectly summed up by the German saying, "Caution is better than regret." This means that Germany's legal system is overly conservative, their licensing system is overly conservative, their permitting system is overly conservative, and their public services are overly conservative. How can the third largest economy on earth compete with such a mentality? The story of Germany is one of risk management, but poorly at that. It is an example when a country is run by Model UN fanatics, and not those with experience in the arena. How can a country that prides itself on risk management decide to phase out nuclear and instead rely on the ever so reliable Russia? How can a country that prides itself on advanced engineering refuse to subsidize energy to protect industry while they suffer the consequences of government decisions? How can a country with a debt brake decide to admit so many immigrants and refugees while refusing to soften fiscal constraints to support infrastructure? Germany is at an inflection point. Terrible leadership has gotten it to where it is, and we don't expect that to change. All parties seem to be obtuse and clueless about what the real issues are. Thankfully, Germany, unlike most other countries, has a ton of fiscal capacity. Their lower growth is partially a byproduct of lower levels of investment. Simply put, soften the debt brake, invest thoughtfully in high ROI infrastructure, introduce a more competitive tax regime, remove bureaucracy, and unleash the power of Germany. Ran an den Speck. Pardon the pronunciation. Thank you for watching 2 in 20. Subscribe for more economics, politics, and business insight.